I would say you're on the leading edge of how production is being done these days. As you look at our industry, what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
I think there is an inevitable move for that production space to move to compute rather than being appliance-based. I mean, people still like tactile control surfaces, and so I think there's going to be elements of hardware that are still involved in that production space, but more and more of the production elements are going to be in compute. Now, that's going to be a mixture of on-prem compute that's owned by the content producer, and then effectively scaling up using public cloud infrastructure. Appear is a company that makes solutions for the transport of live production media, video, audio, metadata, everything including compression, IP encapsulation, transport, manipulation, processing that's needed as part of the live production chain from the acquisition through to and including the media processing elements.
Does that mean that you're essentially doing an FTP stream? Is that what you're doing?
No. So this is an FTP. This is all about a live, effectively, generally UDP flow. So live flows that are coming typically from event locations like sports venues or live studio productions. And a lot of what we're doing now is for what we call remote production or distributed production, where companies are looking to take all of the ISO feeds, the individual camera feeds, all of the individual audio feeds, long haul them to a central location where the processing and control is done.
So this would be like I've got 5 cameras or 50 cameras on remote, and rather than have operators at each camera, I control the camera remotely and then feed the camera signal back via the internet to a control room located somewhere comfortable. So I don't have to send all the crew out. Everybody stays at home and does the editing.
Exactly. So there's lots of savings there. There's a saving in energy. So there's a sustainability because you're not taking so much equipment and you're not taking lots of people. You can actually make better use of the people because they can actually generally do more programs if they're centrally located. And you're not having to move the equipment. You can have central equipment which can be used for multiple events back to back. So there's lots of savings for doing that, and more people. There's a general trend in live production to actually moving more and more towards this centralized or remote production approach.
I can see why an Olympics would want to do this, and I could see why a sport like soccer or football would want to do this, but is there any kind of an application where somebody that doesn't have a $25 billion budget can take advantage of this?
Absolutely, and I think one of the key things that this does for what I would call those lower tier events, it makes doing multi-camera production for those kind of events viable. So we're talking about suddenly things become viable because you haven't got to ship loads of equipment. You can just take a few, even unmanned PTZ cameras, to an event. You can backhaul them, and then you can have a very low-cost production chain, and that's actually what I call democratizing, the low-end events, because suddenly things that were not even viable with the traditional truck rolls and tons of people actually can be done with very, very few people in a very efficient but high quality manner.
You used a term called backhaul. What does that mean?
Just that pulling all of the feeds, all of the ISO feeds from the cameras and the audio, everything that's needed from the acquisition site, wherever that may be, to wherever you're doing that. And that may be for traditional broadcasters or people with effectively data centers of their own. That may be their own facility, but also equally now and more that's taking it into the cloud. So you're actually saying wherever my acquisition site is, we're actually taking all of those feeds, we're connecting them into cloud infrastructure, and that cloud infrastructure can be effectively, the production elements can be ephemeral. They don't exist. You spin them up an hour before you need them, you do the production, then you spin them down. So you're only paying for the 3 or 4 hours of compute time that you need to actually run the event.
2 issues, and I'm not sure which way to go next. We've got the security issue, because As soon as you say cloud, that doesn't imply security. And the other is, what am I actually putting on the site? Let's just say I'm shooting a soccer game, a high school soccer, because it isn't a large stadium, it doesn't have a huge infrastructure. What is you And what do I have to plug into whatever you provide?
Okay, so Appear provides extremely high density, effectively solutions for the encapsulation and compression and transport of all of the feeds that you're gathering at site.
So I've got HDMI coming out of the camera, or SDI, and it's going into your box?
Yes, or 2110, whatever it is. So you'll be taking a multiplicity of SDI feeds from a dozen cameras or whatever you've got, and they may be manned cameras or they may be your remote PTZ cameras, and you feed them into our system. Similarly, you get all of the audio feeds and you aggregate them, feed them into the system. We then compress them with pristine compression, encapsulate them into IP, use the appropriate protection mechanisms. So if we're using public internet connectivity, which we probably are for the lower tier events, then we use techniques, ARQ techniques like SRT, to actually protect those feeds as they go across the internet and get to the location. That might be, a cloud location, or it might be your own private location at the far end. But we provide that solution to provide the high quality guaranteed performance of that connectivity.
Security. Yep. How do you make sure that people aren't watching the feeds?
So there are a variety of layers to that. I mean, first of all, your comment about security in cloud. I mean, one observation is probably that people like AWS, GCP, etc., have actually got security nailed up better than probably most people have that run servers in their own premises, because they have to exist in a fully secure environment to be actually viable and have the credentials for customers to trust them. And I would say that those guys, as broadcast people, we need to leverage the bigger IT industry, because the IT industry understands what needs to be done for security. And I think probably where the media industry has failed thus far to a degree is they haven't embraced all of the best practice that the larger IT industry actually has for things like security.
But I can't afford an IT department. So does that mean that I don't have any security, or can I rely on you for security? And if so, what do you need? How can I reassure myself that this high value thing that I'm producing, whatever that is going to be protected?
Yep. So we can encrypt the data that's actually being transported. So we have scrambling, etc., that we can protect the data flows as they're being transported. That's especially even more important now over public internet, because traditionally higher tier broadcasters have hired private leased lines, which have been relatively secure because they've leased them off a carrier as a point-to-point guaranteed circuit. Whereas now, especially for cost efficacy, we're tending to use more and more public internet, and that means that you have to be protecting the content that you're traveling over that. So absolutely, we have the ability to protect that data as it traverses the network. And the other key thing that has to be protected is the control space as well, because it's one thing to protect the actual media data itself, but you also need to make sure that you have security on the control layer, so the ability, the tools that allow you to control the flows as well.
Do you announce anything new with the show?
So we've actually got a number of new things that we've been talking about at the show here. The main one being we've actually started developing, so we've got our chassis, which is our main appliance, if you like, which is very high density, very low power, very spatially efficient. What we've started developing, which we've just been announcing this fall, is a complementary software solution. A lot of our customers have said, we love your product, but we actually want to use it to get into the cloud, and we don't have so many tools that we feel are so usable and safe in the cloud infrastructure. So we've just launched the development of some tools which we're going to be releasing the first ones of in the new year, which are software tools which actually allow us to complement our appliance, which will be at the acquisition site in the cloud. So that next part of the process, as we start to do the production in software, be that public or private cloud, we're going to be releasing some tools that actually allow people to have that complementary capability that they trust from Appear in the software environment.
How do you price your service?
So that's a very difficult question to answer. It's based largely on the number of channels that you're doing. So we have some flexible licensing. So the licensing we do of both the capabilities on the hardware platform and the software platform once it's released are largely going to be pro rata to the number of flows that you're having and the quality of those flows and the number of things you want to do. So it's designed to scale with the kind of operation you've got. So it works for lower tier events, it works for higher tier events, it works for small and large scale.
Is it basically priced by the duration of the event as opposed to a subscription or where I have to pay an annual fee? How is that structured?
One of the other things we're actually launching, which we're going to be working at during next year, is an overall flexible licensing scheme for our whole portfolio of solutions, which we're calling APX, Appear APX. Currently, we actually license on the appliance individual functions. And what we're moving towards, especially with the release of the software tools, is a much more of a flexible licensing system. So you can do it, as you say, you can license it for a period of time, and that can be then effectively pay as you go for the use you want to make of those capabilities.
I would say you're on the leading edge of how production is being done these days. As you look at our industry, what are some of the trends that you're seeing?
I think there is an inevitable move for that production space to move to compute rather than being appliance-based. I mean, people still like tactile control surfaces, and so I think there's going to be elements of hardware that are still involved in that production space, but more and more of the production elements are going to be in compute. Now, that's going to be a mixture of on-prem compute that's owned by the content producer, and then effectively scaling up using public cloud infrastructure, I think, because there's cost elements of running in cloud, and there's cost elements of running in your own infrastructure. And I think where we're moving to is going to be a hybrid of appliances and compute, and a hybrid of on-prem compute for individual content producers combined with public cloud compute to enhance and allow scaling up and down.
So I could use my existing 2110 tools, and you're just providing the feed.
Indeed, exactly that. The thing we're working on as an industry, which is pivotal, and it's really true for this autumn, this fall here, is we're working on trying to get interoperability and compatibility within the software compute space. So, we've had compatibility on SDI signals for 30 years. We've had compatibility with 2110 for almost 10 years now. What we haven't yet got is open compatibility for compute handoff for doing production tools within compute. And that's the really big ambition that a lot of us within the industry are trying to drive at the moment.
What would you like as the one thought you want people to keep in mind when they think about Appear?
I think Appear is on a journey to actually embrace the future of live production as it evolves. And my one thing would be, come with us on that journey.